We've had so much fun on the experience this week, and we barely even scratched the surface of Tom Prichard's long and illustrious career. So we have asked him to stay over and regale us with more glorious stories of wrestling days past. And we had talked about up until the time you were in Continental Wrestling working for the Fullers, Doc. And thank you for sticking with us. And I got a Robert Fuller story, if you don't mind, if you'll indulge me.
Yeah.
I didn't know whether you were there or not in the territory. You may not have been when Robert got stuck in the hotel room.
I don't recall, but that doesn't mean I wasn't there. There's a lot of things I don't recall.
Well, you will recall that for a brief period of time, Robert Fuller had a valet named Sylvia, who was also his significant other at the time. And I was not there, but the way that I heard it, and it may have come from Tony Anthony. So this may, I don't know.
Oh, well, that's suspect in itself. Okay.
That may cause, the source may be suspect, the dirty white boy. But the story that I got was that Robert, who is an emotional fellow and is one of the more entertaining guys in the history of wrestling and can cut a promo in or out of the ring or off camera, on camera. But he and Sylvia had got in a verbal dust up, as they say. And they were at one of those hotels. It was the old kind of, like a Days Inn where the door opens out into the parking lot, and they had the air conditioning unit under the big picture window. And long story short, the door had been slammed in the heat of this argument. And Robert was on the inside of the room and Sylvia was on the outside of the room, and they slammed the door so hard, whoever was, and I'm sure it was Robert that slammed it, that the door got stuck. And Robert, who may or may not have been in a chemically induced state, suddenly got so claustrophobic that he was trapped inside the hotel room. He couldn't get out. The door wouldn't open. He was freaking out, and the maintenance people had to come and take the air conditioning unit out of the wall from under so that he could crawl out through the hole that the air conditioning unit was in to escape the hotel room.
Yeah, that just sounds like the worst trip. Awful trip.
No. I don't think I was there, but I think Robert had many dust ups at that time, and maybe it had something to do with that dusting up.
As a matter of fact, one time I think Sylvia stomped because Ron and Robert both at various times went under the nom de plume, the Tennessee Stud. And they, of course, wore big cowboy hats when they were doing that. And at one point, Robert and Sylvia had got into it again, and Sylvia stomped on his hat. And Robert's like, "Sylvia, you fucking bitch! Ron, my brother Ron, give me that hat."
Yeah. Well, it was Well, it was a family affair, to say the least.
Continental Wrestling was, and I never got to, I worked the area, never got to work Continental itself, but I worked Alabama a few times, and I would have liked to have spent more time there, but there was just only so many days in a year. But you in the rest of the 80s, you were through Continental, you went to Portland, you were back in Tennessee, and finally in 1991, you were wrestling in the Memphis territory again, because that's when Stan Lane and I had left WCW, and I was in the process of speaking to Rick Rubin about starting Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And I came over to Memphis, managed Stan and Steve, the Fabulous Ones, in an angle against Jerry. They turned heel for the first time against Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee and Jackie Fargo, but you were there, and the Dirty White Boy was there, and some great talent. And that's when I realized that there was enough talent out there that I believed, we could revitalize the Knoxville wrestling area with Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And originally, my top tag team was going to be the Midnight Express, because I had never dreamed, since Jim Herd had fought us at every step of the way, the last two contract renewals that we had. And the last one, actually, he was voted unanimously against. All the agents, all the producers, the bookers, everybody voted against him to re-sign the Midnight Express. But I figured, when Stan and I had left by the next May of 91, that Bobby Eaton would be available, because I would never dream that Jim Herd would sign him again. Well, Bobby ended up being the guy that wrestled in WCW the longest under the Turner administration. He was there from 88 until like 2002 or whatever. Right. So Bobby was not available, and I was stuck. I needed a tag team partner for Stan Lane. Where do you find a guy that can uphold the tradition of Jim Cornette's tag team in the ring? There was only one choice. You were the guy, and I called you, and you agreed to come, to your either credit or chagrin, one or the other. I don't know in hindsight which it was, but you and Stan debuted as the Heavenly Bodies in when Smoky Mountain opened up. Actually, about 10 weeks after Smoky Mountain opened up, I held you guys back for the big reveal, which took place at a Smoky Mountain TV taping, and you won the tag team title in the tournament. Our first program was against the Fantastics, and off we went. And you were kind enough to indulge me in this upstart territory, and you became, the one guy that I could count on to not give me a headache, which says a lot.
Well, but here's the deal. You did me a bigger favor than you'll ever know. Again, just with your credibility and Stan's credibility, I'm not that naive to know what I was doing in Memphis sure wasn't earth-shattering or groundbreaking. So you gave me an opportunity to get out of that and try something. And with two guys who've been on the national level and accomplished things that I had yet to accomplish in at that time, if that was a 91 or 92, right?
92.
92. So after 12 years of wrestling, I've been in different territories, and I had a good time. And that's really all I was looking to do, is be a wrestler and have a good time. And now you gave me a chance to be in programs that I knew if you were going to do it, it was going to be not only a top program, but it was going to be a great program. So here I am getting to work on top with you and Stan, and against Bobby and Tommy, and then later on Ricky and Robert. So yeah, it was much appreciated, and not only to have a full-time job, but to have a full-time job around guys that you like being around, and around the territory that was so cool, like Knoxville. And this area, East Tennessee, is still you walk in somewhere or you see people, they still know old time wrestlers like Whitey Caldwell and Ron and Don Bass. I mean, they do.
Ron and Don Wright.
What am I talking about? Did I say Bass? I sure did.
Yeah, well, there was a Ron and Don Bass work there too.
Yes, there was. But, well, we're talking about the Wright brothers and Whitey Caldwell. People still, they're older fans. But my point is this: Knoxville has it was a unique area, and I can understand why you wanted to come here and revitalize it. I just think times were changing so fast, and you were doing one-man show. Everything came on your shoulders. You had a couple people helping you, Casey and Brian, Hildebrand, and guys like that. But you were doing everything yourself. So I mean, yeah, it was, man, for me to be able to work with you guys was a dream come true, actually. And it was very cool.
But it worked both ways, because the money drawing programs that we had in Smoky Mountain Wrestling boiled down to Tracy Smothers and the Dirty White Boy as singles, and the Heavenly Bodies and the Rock and Roll Express as a tag team. And I mean, when we were going to some of those spot shows in Eastern Kentucky, and there were plenty of stinkers, don't get me wrong, but when you'd go to Saltville, Virginia, and draw 800 or 1,000 people, or Feds Creek, Kentucky, and they were lined up out the door, Hazard, Kentucky, Harlan, Kentucky, the Heavenly Bodies and the Rock and Roll Express, and the matches. Still to this day, one of not only my favorite matches that I've ever been involved in, and I'm talking about including WCW, NWA, WWF, the match in Pikeville, Kentucky, the famous final scene, the loser leave town match with the Rock and Roll and the Bodies, when you guys in '94, when you guys were ready to go to the WWF, which we'll talk about here in a second. And the place was jam-packed, the Pikeville College Gym, 2,000 people hanging from the rafters. They were throwing babies in the air at that finish in the cage. And, it just the Bodies and the Rock and Roll were really what we hung our hat on for most of that run of Smoky Mountain Wrestling. We would go away from it. We'd come back to it. but the matches in the ring were they were thrilling, and they were as good as any wrestling matches in any territory that were taking place at that time. And, you guys, you just clicked. You had chemistry, whether it was you and Stan against Ricky and Robert, or then later on you and Jimmy Del Rey. And bless Jimmy, he was a guy who in the ring he could perform, but outside the ring, maybe he didn't make some of the best choices.
Right. No, right. And you know what I think that was, Jim, with no matter what combination was there, was you had everybody on the card, but for the most part, everybody on the card was passionate, and I know we overuse that word, but it's the only word I can use, passionate, and really loved what they were doing, because it was still old-time professional wrestling where you had angles, and you had blood, and you had guts, and that's what the people of Saltville, Virginia, and Pikeville, and those people in the down and dirty towns that wanted to show up and see wrestling. They weren't looking for sports entertainment with the clean shine on it. They wanted to see some guys get down and get bloody and get dirty and get hurt and get bruised and get hit, because that's what they did to each other on Friday night. So they wanted to see people do it and do it well. And I think that's what everybody you had in the territory understood. And again, being a one-man show, I couldn't imagine, because the thing was, I didn't want to advocate for myself. So you advocated for me in anything we did as the Heavenly Bodies, and that goes for WWF as well. But be that as it may, it was such a great time because Ricky and Robert were still into it, and Stan was into it up until the time he wasn't. And then when Jimmy came along, you're right. I can't say anything about Jimmy's in-ring work. We were just two different people outside the ring, and but it still went the way it went. So I mean, it was a great time, and to have White Boy and Tracy Smothers, and then Brian Lee, who, my God, what potential he had, given an opportunity to come out and be really raw and have a chance to get over.
And we, in 1993, we kind of set a record because Bill Watts was booking and in charge of talent in WCW at the time. And, we made the deal and brought the Bodies and Rock and Roll match to Super Brawl in Asheville, North Carolina. And so we appeared not only in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, but then we defended the tag team titles on a WCW pay-per-view. Then when Watts left, we left and turned around, and Stan, decided to retire, and we got Jimmy. And then it was because of you that we were able to get the WWF deal, because we did that promo with your dad, with your dad as a rib on Bruce, and sent it up to him. And and that was our entree. So then we turned around and took the Smoky Mountain Tag Team titles to the WWF, and the only time that an outside promotion was recognized by Vince McMahon. So we were not only in Smoky Mountain Wrestling full time, but also did the pay-per-view for, Atlanta. And then later on that year did a pay-per-view with the Rock and Roll and the Bodies, for Vince. So that in 1 year, we basically, wrestled in every major promotion in the business. So that was, that was due to you and and your dad coming up and us trying to rib Bruce.
Yeah, well, I think there's a little more to it than that, but it was once we got up there, and I knew as soon as they grabbed you, they said, well, here we go, because you weren't going on the road, and I knew once you did Yokozuna and Davey and Owen, it was going to be just a matter of time before we would be where we were, and we did. It wasn't bad. And I tell you what kind of set it off. I have one story about that. Pat Patterson, I'll never forget. This was a really told tale for me. Bruce came to Jimmy and me one day at TV. I don't know if you were there. I don't know if I ever told you this. We might have, but again, you talk about blurring memories. Bruce said, "Hey, Pat wants to talk to you guys about your match on TV last week or last taping or whatever it was." And we're thinking, "Oh, great! Pat wants to tell us how great we did." And of course, Pat came over and just ripped us up and down about everything we did wrong, and it was terrible. We didn't know how to work. And I mean, it was just like, "Wow, why don't you kick us in the teeth?" And man, oh man! So I just said, "Yeah, I get it," because I really didn't. Again, Bruce was there. I didn't want to. I didn't want to go to the bar, and I didn't want to be seen as being misperceived doing anything wrong. So I went back to my room and did all the wrong I could do by myself. And anyway, that was that didn't help my cause, because again, you have to be sociable and you have to be cliquish, and then you have to want the guys to work with you. And the only ones who really wanted to work with us was the Bushwhackers. So we got to work with the Bushwhackers.
The best match probably of the run was SummerSlam '93 with the Steiners. That in their hometown, the Palace of Auburn Hills. And, we tore the house down, and it was an outstanding match. And then, of course, we never got to really work with them again.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean. They would throw you a bone, and then they would just take it back. But then, I saw when you weren't on the road with us, I saw things that I said, "Oh, okay," because this could be really, really kind of touchy here. And you still had Davey, around, and Owen, and Davey was relentless in his ribs. So I just didn't want to be around. I didn't want to be around anything that could be misperceived as Tom's doing this and Tom's doing that. So, but overall, it was a great experience, I guess.
And then the bodies went the way that some teams go, but the body Donnas came up, because there was Chris Candido, and they saw a resemblance size-wise. And when you cut your hair, and I know that killed you, and it killed me too, because
my God,
the hair was your trademark. And but as a body Donna with Sonny, talk about memories of teaming with Chris Candido, because what a great kid!
Yeah,
what a great kid!
You're right. No, Chris was the greatest person. We say that a lot, but he really was, because he loved the business. He would do anything in the world for the business. But when they called me first about cutting my hair, I said no, and they said, "Okay, great, bye." Well, then I thought, well, wait a minute. Here's just hair, so I'll do it. So anyway, I felt so uncomfortable because I've had the hair for so long, and it was like a shield. It was like something I could hide behind, and it just, I didn't like looking at people anyway. I didn't want to be around people, but now I have to have my eyes open, and my face is visible, and I look like Chris, which wasn't bad. It's just that, I love Chris so much, and we all did, because he just had that way about him. He loved the business, and he was a great worker, and he would do anything in the world for wrestling. And I get that, because that's the way I grew up, and that's the way I felt. But, we would go out and have great matches, I thought, but never again. I don't want to say, I don't want to say anything like we didn't get the credit we deserved, but at the same time, we had a valet now who's coming out and demanding all the attention, not only in the ring, but in the back. And it wasn't always positive attention. And that put a strain, because I rode with Chris and Tammy just one time to a town, just one way. And when I got there, I went to the Godwins and said, "Man, can I ride back with you guys? Because I can't take it." And so I rode back with them, and it was just, and that was constantly with them, and it was constantly with her. And I knew it was taking its toll on Chris, but at the same time, she didn't care, and I knew he loved her, but it was so blatant that everybody saw it. I knew Chris felt it, but what do you do? And I'm kind of in the middle there, because you don't want to say what you want to say. So do you just leave it lingering with everybody? There was a lot of heat there, man. I'm dancing around this, but there was a lot of heat. And
I told her many times. I said, Tammy, you could make Genghis Khan a babyface.
Yes.
But that's one of the reasons why she was so good on camera, is because she could get heat instantly.
Yes. I agree 100%. As long as I wasn't in the middle of that or around it, I was fine with it. But I was right there, and it was back on me. And then I had a talk with her one time after we all came in from the airport, and we caught the shuttle. And there's the clique, and Tammy and Chris and me and a couple of the other boys, and of course one of the guys starts, and the other guy starts, and Chris isn't saying anything, but Tammy's eating it up for all it's worth. And it's really uncomfortable. So Chris and I go down, or I went down to grab something to eat, and at the restaurant, and Tammy came down, and she's all upset. And I said, "What's wrong?" Said, "Well, you go up and talk to Chris. He's mad." So, well, Tammy, no wonder he's mad. I mean, you kind of egged on everything in the van. And she said, "Okay, let's just come up and talk to him." And so when I went up and saw him, and of course he was having a hard time. And I told him and her at the same time that she can't do this. She can't flaunt what she flaunts in front of the boys. And she went ballistic and told me it was all about her. And what about me? What about me? What about my feelings? And I'm looking going, oh my God, this is futile. I just put my foot in my mouth. So, it was from then on, this was kind of the beginning of us teaming. And the other thing about a tag team, and I do believe this, Michael Hayes told me, you have to get along with your partner outside the ring as well as inside to make it really click. And I think people feel that. And I didn't have that. I had that a little bit with Stan because I understood Stan. I believe I understood Stan. Stan was pretty easy to get along with, I thought. And Jimmy was Jimmy. We were two different people. I didn't like going into a bar announcing we were there. I wanted to go sit at the table, but Jimmy wanted to go in and let everybody know he's a wrestler, and everybody know we're there, and everybody's got to. Anyway, and then Chris, I love the guy, but there was that other element involved. So I was 3 for 0 for 3, whatever. Anyway. That the Candido part of my life was so it was bittersweet, and then when I saw him later on, I think he had come to terms with a lot of things, and then he passed away.
What I'm trying to remember because it's been so long, but what was the end of the Body Donnas?
Well, Chris actually broke his neck in Madison Square Garden.
That's right.
Yeah, he broke it. We worked with the Godwins that night, and we came back to the dressing room, and he was sitting in the hallway, and I came up to him and asked him, he's okay. He says, "Man, I hurt my neck." I said, "Are you okay?" He goes, "I don't know." I said, "Man, you got to go to the hospital." And they went in downtown Manhattan where you could just imagine where all the crazies were. And I didn't go with him. Tammy went with him, and somebody else went with him. I don't remember. Oh, maybe it was because I was flying out, I think. Or I was riding with Bradshaw and Dutch one time. Anyway, he broke his neck, came back. I mean, he wasn't, they put a collar on him. It was like one of those hairline fractures, but he sure didn't need to be bumping. And that was it. He worked a couple times. He even wore a collar one time, standing on the apron in the ring when he's wrestling. And Vince got so pissed because he didn't want him wearing a neck brace while he's in the ring, But that was it. And eventually it just came down to we weren't getting booked anymore. I mean, we just weren't. And I kind of knew it was over, and I think he knew it was over. He's kind of glad it was over because as I said, it's a cliquish business anyway, but in WWF at that time, if you weren't connected with somebody, you were pretty much out in the cold. And even though Bruce was there.
And Chris also, he didn't like the Body Donna deal. He wanted to be himself. He wanted to be the performer that he could be. Yeah. But when he got hurt, that's the problem with tag teams. It's like having one midget. Well, you know, what do you
Right.
do with one midget? You got one tag team guy.
Funny you should use that analogy, huh? But
well, no, I'm just saying.
I'm just kidding. We had one midget, and I wasn't getting booked, and I didn't want to be a body downer either for the damn record. I hated the body downer gimmick. I despised it for the record. I hated the haircut. I hated the tag team. I love Candido, but I hated the body downers. He should have been Chris Candido. Period. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you were floating around for a while as Stan so quoted so eloquently, wandering aimlessly. But then they realized that was the late '90s. That was the time where all the territories were pretty much gone under, and where's talent coming from? And they realized that well, hey, we got this guy here that has had so much experience at that time, almost 20 years. And you got the spot training guys in the warehouse up there in Stamford. And the first class was was pretty heavy. The Rock and well, who was in that first group? You and Dory were shepherding that flock.
Yeah, the first actual. There were three guys, and it was Akamal Brackus and Mark Henry and The Rock. So that was 1996, the summer of '96, right after the Olympics. And after that, that's when Dory Funk made the deal to come in and do the Funkin' Dojo. Rock had already started after that. Before that, he came in August, and then for Survivor Series, he made his WWF debut. He had already been in Memphis, I think, for a year, and then they brought him into the studio. And I don't remember who all was in. I think Edge, Christian, maybe Val Venus.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember who was in Dory's the Funkin' Dojo first group, because there was a lot. I want to say a lot. I think there may be 15 guys, but out of that, the ones I do remember were Edge, Christian, Val, and man,
how did you feel about after 20 years in the ring, and now you're not in the ring, you're not on television, but you're training other guys? How did you take to it at first?
Yeah, I was very relieved in a way that I wasn't. I got to tell you, man, when I first went to WWF, I was 33 years old, and the bumps were getting harder every night, and that ring was so stiff, and it wasn't as fun as it used to be. But now getting a chance to train guys was giving me a new perspective on things, and I really did. I was looking forward to it. So I really thought it was a cool thing and a great opportunity to try something different. So,
and by 90, two things happen. One, and I agree with you about the rings, because that's remember when I had. We did spot show camps, dojo spot shows up in Massachusetts and etc., where we found a guy that had an old Southern style suspension ring, because the WWF rings at that time were just hard as a rock and had no give. And they were built for the big men, the Bundys and the Hogans. And I said, why are we doing this? We've got all the money, more money than the federal government. We can build rings. And we found a guy, one of those spot shows, that had an old Southern style suspension ring that had give, and you could take bumps in it. And I remember I brought it to the studio and had their guys. I said, hey, build this like this. We need to change the bumps are getting bigger, and the guys are getting smaller, and the action's getting faster, and we need a ring that that guys can work in without fracturing themselves. And of course there was resistance, because then they figured, well, that ring won't last like that the way it's built. I said, the fucking ring's 40 years old. It sits in a guy's backyard all year long in Massachusetts in the snow, and it's still up. And finally they changed the rings, and it was the lighter guys and the faster guys and the guys taking bigger bumps were able to to benefit from that. And then we had the problem with you were training guys in the warehouse, the Titan Studio TV warehouse, and the paint fumes when they were building sets, and the sawdust when they were sawing building stuff, and it was a bad atmosphere. And that's where I'd run into Danny Davis and got the idea to take a developmental program to an actual territory and get it out of a warehouse and in front of people, in front of fans. And at that point, they pretty much put you on as a trainer to come down. You spent a lot of time in OVW, working with Danny Davis, who you knew from Continental. And who are some of your favorite students in those years that you trained? Who did you know was going to make it instantly? Who didn't make it that should have? Who really didn't have it to begin with? If you want to knock people,
well,
tell me some stories.
I think the guy who everybody was who I say everybody who Vince was probably looking at was Brockus. And he got 2 vignettes on Raw, and that's as far as he went. Yeah. I worked with him on house shows, and he was nice enough guy, but he didn't belong in the wrestling business. Mark Henry was another guy who I just thought never in a million years. But eventually Mark came to learn, and I think the turning point, quite honestly, was going down to OVW and getting his graduate or master's degree, if you will, because that was where you saw a change in him after he went to OVW, and Danny, I think, had a heart-to-heart with him. Maybe you did too. But he got the lights came on, I think, and I was really glad to see that, because there's only so much you can do in a warehouse like that. There's only so much you can do on the road, and you need to be into this fully. It's a 24-hour gig. It's not something you just shut off like 9 to 5. And one of the things, real quick, don't want to get sidetracked too much, but one of the things I think that was so helpful, but I'm not sure, and maybe they are, I don't know, because I don't know what they're doing in developmental today, but OVW did was have the practice tapes and the study tapes of anybody from the old school to the new school that knew how to work and had psychology, along with promos they could watch and listen to. So I think, Mark studied that and watched and learned and applied what he learned. So I was really happy for him. And of course, The Rock already had it. I hated telling people for years that I even trained The Rock, but I'll take credit at least for having hands-on for 3 months and working with him in his early matches. So,
well, I remember the first time he came to the studio, and you guys were working out, and I asked him, I said, how many lessons have you had? And he said, well, I worked out with my dad for a couple of weeks. It looked like he had been in wrestling school for 2 years at that point.
Right.
So, and we knew, and with the look and et cetera, who surprised you? Who did you think, geez, never, and they made it?
Well, I got to tell you, Test is one of the guys who did surprise me, because he stunk on ice. And, but he surprised me, and that may be a weird name to some people, but he came out, and not only did he surprise me with his work, but his attitude. I mean, he caught on in the last part that I saw him. And about a year before he passed, I worked with him in a spot show for Sal Corrente, and he was just so different than I remembered. I mean, he seemed to have got it. And gosh, I'm trying to remember the last. Tiger Ali Singh really became a big star. And my gosh! But he was there, and I thought, oh my God. And I don't want to knock anybody, but he was one guy that really should have. You talk about they wanted him to make it because he had this great persona, I guess they thought. But anyway,
they were looking to open up India, and his father had connections. But the problem, I looked at him almost like a Hindu George Goulas.
Yes, perfect analogy.
He never really understood why that everybody hated him, because his father was a big deal, was a rich man. He was the bosses, the stars, and Tiger Jeet Singh was never a great worker, but he was in the right place, the right time, found his niche, Japan, Ontario, where there's a huge Hindu population. But Tiger Ali Singh had the silver spoon in his mouth from a very young age, and it came off somewhat like it was owed to him, and not popular with the rest of the boys, and didn't get it. Truthfully, the acorn not only fell somewhat far from the tree, but rolled down the hill and floated away in the storm drain.
Yeah, he wasn't a real smart guy, because you couldn't smarten him up if you tried. But I mean, for the most part, the guys that came in and got it, and you saw more of them in OVW. And when I would go down and look, Santino, it's another guy who I know you're familiar with, but he's a guy that, I would look at him in his gimmick in OVW, and I thought, well, there's no way. But then you put him in the role he's in now, and it fits. So I mean, and there's people that I didn't care for at the time either, and who are now in prominent positions. But you just gotta kind of look at it and go, okay, well, that's what it is. So.
And you spent some time in Florida too with Steve Kern's company before the what do they call it, the Performance Center now?
Yes.
But Steve started that, and the problem I thought in Tampa was we used to call it the DUI factory, because unfortunately, there you had, in Louisville, we had strict rules to follow, and we had supervision, and it was Louisville, Kentucky. It wasn't Tampa, Florida. The guys had classes almost every day. We ran 3 or 4 shows a week in front of people. They didn't have time to get in trouble, and if they started to get in trouble, we knew about it because we had people watching them. In Tampa, they didn't have the schedule that we had in terms of live events, and possibly not the supervision. And plus, it's Tampa, Florida, and everybody went out and and partied, and there were problems there. Did you have trouble trying to smarten the guys up, not to the in-ring, but to how they should conduct themselves out of the ring?
Well, yes and no. And here was the attitude that Steve and I both took. It is Tampa, Florida, and they are young, and they're going to do what they're going to do. We didn't have the luxury, and neither did you guys, but OVW was in business even before the developmental system came in. So Danny pretty much had a pretty good hand and had his finger on the pulse of what was going on.
He had a framework. He had a framework. He had a framework.
Yes, he did. And you had Dean Hill there to help you guys as well, right?
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, we
25-year veteran of the Louisville Police Force who could intimidate people into behaving properly when needed.
Correct. And I seem to remember there was a huge star who had an issue come out, and you guys knew about it and tried to get it taken care of before. I understand that, and that's what we should, and that's the way it works. I mean, you try and help your guys out so they don't mess up again. You give them a hand because they are young and they're going to make mistakes. But in Tampa, FCW was starting fresh. There was no framework. We didn't have the shows that Danny had in place, or you guys had. We didn't have the Performance Center where you have the gym here, you have this big 60,000 square feet, however many feet it is. But it's a beautiful facility from the pictures I've seen. And it's great. I wish you would have had that in Tampa, and I wish you would have had the same opportunities, but we didn't, so we made do with what we had. It was a work in progress trying to keep the guys out of the bars or out of trouble, because they are the guys, they are the boys, and it was still that culture. It was, to an extent, not everybody was partying, but it was DUI central a lot of times. And God, and even when we tell them, stay out of the bars, it's like you can tell them all day long, but we couldn't babysit them. And I think you guys did have that advantage in Louisville, where you had your people in place, you had the framework in place, And not everybody was a saint in Louisville. You know, you had the issues there. I can remember again. I remember having a conversation with a couple of you guys who had a bar fight in Louisville, and I think I'm still paying it off. You know,
yeah,
yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right? And it's like, my gosh, yeah, that kind of stuff is going to happen no matter where you go. Tampa just lended itself to more opportunities, you know, on Howard and Armenia Street. You know, it was like the bar central, and there's a college there, and you know, it's the beaches and everything you want. So some guys learned and some guys didn't, but you know, we did what we could do, and I think in part that is trying to help everybody learn that you have to be professional inside as well as outside the ring.
Okay,
well, got it.
Here's something to close up on for this edition of the Drive-Thru. You've been in the wrestling business professionally, actively as a wrestler, trainer, as you said, starting as a second for 35 years. What advice, if you had to sit here right now and in just a couple of minutes tell aspiring young wrestlers, you've been through everything, you've done some stupid things, you've done some great things, and everything in between, what advice do you have? What would you say to young guys getting in the wrestling business right now, how to conduct themselves, or just what would you tell them?
Well, I would tell them, first of all, learn and understand how to play the game. No pun intended, but at the same time, it is a business and it is a game. Have fun, but at the same time, now more than ever, has it become a business, and big business at that. You know, John Cena started out in California when he had a school right next door to him in Massachusetts. So then he came to OVW and got groomed the right way. So you need to find some place that's going to teach you how to play the game, how to learn professional wrestling, sports entertainment, and get somewhere that you feel you're learning. And because there's school on every street, school on every corner. Not everybody's going to tell you the right things, and there is no necessary, this is the only way to do something. And if somebody tells you this is the only way to take a hip toss, this is the only way to deliver an arm drag, then they're wrong. Because there's not just one way. There's this way and there's that way. If it works for you this way, great. But if it doesn't, we need to adapt. And there's a lot of things to take in when you're learning professional wrestling. A lot of things to take in when you're learning about sports entertainment. But believe me, there's not one without the other.
What do you look for in a school? What do you look for? What are the warning signs of a bad school or the earmarks of a good school?
Well, the guy who's training, or the guy who has his name on the school, or is talking to you, what has he done? Who's he trained? Where has he been? If it was Marky Robertson down here over to the fair, over to the rec center, he got a ring in the back. Who's Marky trained? Well, I was the assassin. I swear to God, I've had 4 people, and this is no lie, 4 people tell me they were the assassin, and they worked with me. Yeah, okay, well, bullshit.
I just met the world-famous spoiler at the Lexington Comic Convention back in March. When he was 5'6" and about 145 pounds and looked like he was 55 years old with no hair. And when he took a picture with me, when he had his fat wife take a picture of him and me together, he said, "Hold on." And he pulled out this mask, and it looked like a souvenir mask that hadn't been washed in 15 years. And he put it on and he said, "The people would expect it."
Oh, of course they would.
He convinced his wife that he was the world famous spoiler, and that's and she's the only one that believed it, but she believed it.
Right. Yeah.
But go ahead. Who have they trained? Where have they been? What have they done? What kind of name have they got? What results have they had? Right.
Yes, exactly. And look at the way they speak to people. Look at the way they train people. And look at how they conduct themselves. And they should let you watch a class to give you an idea how they do things. I mean, if they're just bumping the guys and blowing them up for no reason, then get out of there, because I don't believe. Listen, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've never one time in over 34 years stopped in the middle of a match and done 500 squats. There's a place for that. There is a place to do squats. There's a place for conditioning. But when you're learning wrestling, there's enough wrestling drills you can do to get in condition as well. There's nothing like being in ring shape. And that's what you need to do to get in ring shape, is wrestle and do those type of drills, not just squat, push-ups, get ups and out, get ups and out. That's great for conditioning when you're doing that element of training. But if you're going to train, and a normal wrestling practice should go anywhere from 2.5 to 3 hours. Any more, you're burnt out. It's fatigue. You're losing after that. That's my opinion. People may believe that you can go 8 hours of training all day long. Let's just blow up all day long for 8 hours. Well, okay. You're going to kill you. You're going to kill your guy.
You're filling up your bump card. The human body has a set amount of bumps, and if you fill it up early before you actually get out in front of people and you're making money at it, then you're wasting your bumps.
It's ridiculous. So 2 hours, 2.5, 3 at the most. Physicality in the ring like that, and see what they do. See if it feels comfortable to you. And something's got to ring true, but. Anybody who tells you can't find them in this internet day and age, you can't look up what they've done, where they've been, who they have connections with or not, then that should tell you everything. And I'm not knocking anybody who wants to be a trainer, but you have to be qualified, and you have to have been somewhere and done something to be qualified. So that's what I would look for.
And then the really good schools, you can teach a trained chimp to do moves, but the really good schools also give you instruction in why you're doing them and when you should do them. And wrestling is not acting, as I've always said and told the guys, it's reacting. Put yourself in a position, if this was legitimate, how would you react to the situation? What would you do when? It's psychology, it's mental, just as much, if not more than physical. And that's why we used to give the practice tapes out of great matches with notes that I would write, explaining why these guys did this, why they did that, what to watch for, what crowd reaction to watch for based on what was perpetrated in the ring. Because you can watch an airline pilot fly a plane, and it doesn't teach you how to fly one. They're punching buttons. You don't know why. There has to be mental as well as physical instruction. There has to be psychology as well as performing moves, or elsewise you're teaching a dance routine. You're not telling a story.
Well, that's what I was getting back to. There's a place for the squats and the get up, get on, get up, get down, and hit the ropes and things like that. But part of the wrestling drills for the 2.5 hours includes that mental aspect of it. That's a huge 90%, in my opinion, part of what this is. And not so much. And there are things you can watch. I'm just going to bury WWE, because there are a couple things you can watch. If you watch Cesaro, if he has a chance to have a great match, he can have a great match with psychology. The problem is today, Jim, and I'll wrap it up real quick. There's not a place where people can go and watch good, solid wrestling every week and see a story being told. And that's what they need to understand is you're telling stories out there, and it should make sense and get people emotionally involved, as you were talking about. Why did the crowd react this way, and why did you get the reaction that way? When the Undertaker streak ended, nobody bought it. Nobody believed that was going to happen. That didn't happen. That was never going to happen. Guess what? It happened. And there was such an honest reaction because they're saying the referee didn't know the finish. And then there's only 4 people, 5 people, however many people. It doesn't matter how many people. The fact is that entire crowd in the Superdome was shocked, and that was a reaction that nobody was betting on. That was an emotion you couldn't get anywhere else. And for all the rights and wrongs, and I didn't agree with it, and I thought it was kind of I would have liked to see him go out with the streak, but at the same time, the more I think about it, what a way to get people to keep talking about it. And what a way to get a reaction like that, where you never expected that. I never expected. I sat there and went, wow. And then to read the backstory, that who knows what the backstory is, because you're reading second, third, fourth hand reports. But I mean, it's that kind of reaction. Who could have got that reaction? Nobody in the world except Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker. Those two guys with the element of that match. Everybody knew the outcome. But they didn't. They were fooled, and that doesn't get done these days. So, the bottom line is, a good trainer has to know why, and not everybody knows why, but they have to feel it too. And the other thing is, if you don't feel it when you're in there, then nobody else is going to feel it too.
Yeah. And I'll throw one more thing in, as Rip Rogers calls it, as seen on TV. Young aspiring wrestlers, not everybody on TV knows what the fuck they're doing or how to do it right. And just because, as seen on TV, just because you see it on TV doesn't necessarily mean that it's right or that it's the best thing to do. And you have to learn the difference.
Yeah, and as you know, even when those guys who are the pros on TV, they've had their match and they come back to the back, you have their agents and Vince and telling them what they did wrong, and tell them not always what they did right, but usually what they did wrong. So, yeah, it's not always just because it was on TV doesn't make them always right.
Well, we could do this all day, and we almost have. But we are out of time for this edition of the Drive-Thru. But Doc, I'd love to have you come back sometime, and we'll tell some more stories of the stuff that we skipped over, because there's much of it.